Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Trump is really, yeah. And then they don't want. Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Catchy tune. Welcome. Access Democracy returns. Alan Miller hosting, as usual, I guess I would say, after 17 years. A return guest, a welcome guest, Rick King, who originally had about 6 titles back, I don't know what, but you've now been elevated to Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer for the entire Thomson Reuters Corporation worldwide. So for that I say thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Alan. Good to see you again.
And it's good to have you. Also, and you haven't been here for probably 6 months or so, probably one of 2 people most responsible for us having this studio, having this equipment, having the state-of-the-art really set up. And for that, we, Eagan, and everyone are forever in your debt. So.
Well, it's a great partnership. I'm just glad it continues so well. It's been 7 years now or something.
I don't know if it's
5
that long,
years.
but
It's
yeah,
been a while,
I would say probably 4 or 5.
It's been a great thing to the advantage of the company and the city. So, you know, I wish
and to access to democracy.
Right. I wish we'd see more of these kind of creative partnerships in the world. It actually saves money and economizes things, and it's a great way to do good business.
The world has become so partisan and so strident that it really is depressing to me as I look at politics today, as I look at wars today, as I look at the needs of people today. It really seems to have gone full circle from when I was a kid.
I kind of agree with you. The current thing that I think about today that drives that home for me is this whole notion around Real ID, where Minnesota's driver's licenses will ultimately be out of compliance, and then people who just use that for identification will not be able to enter federal buildings, military installations, or ultimately airports. And I just think, so why would we have a law against complying with an identification means that standardizes identifications to make us more secure across the country? And why, once you're threatened to not allow our citizens to enter these facilities with our current driver's licenses, why would you not fix that law immediately and repair the issue?
And why, and it happens to be one party in the legislature which is speaking of protecting individual rights, but at the same time, probably only 20% of citizens have a passport. So the other 80%, are they not going to be able to get on a plane unless the legislature fixes it? And you know they have to fix it, so why make an issue out of it?
Exactly.
We are the only state in non-compliance. Now, there are 4 others who haven't cleared it yet, but they're working at it. But we're the only state, the most progressive state, has become the most regressive for, I think, spurious reasons.
And to be fair, when they passed the law saying that the Department of Public Safety couldn't do anything about it, I think there was only 1 vote against the law. So it was a bipartisan thumb in the face of the federal government, basically,
So many things are overreactions.
And you know, the idea about that thing is that you know, certainly it's information that allows you to be secure, that allows the agencies to be more screening of people who have a history where they should be held back more, and allowing the people who are there for the right reasons and who have no history of anything bad to get through. And you know,
so many things just don't make sense to
that
me
doesn't make
anymore.
sense.
Being against registration of weapons to keep them out of the hands of dangerous people. And I say that as someone who has weapons. I see nothing wrong with it. I can see that it lends itself to safety. It keeps weapons out of the hands of really mentally irresponsible or people of different persuasions who are moved to terrorism, as we've seen so much of it in this country. Why do you stand on the Second Amendment, which doesn't even say that, if you read the Second Amendment? And, you know, I have a blunderbuss, and I'll join my militia anytime we're threatened, but makes no sense to me.
That's sort of, I think, when you read the Second Amendment, it was created in the time when the militias were the way that you defended your area, your town, or your state colony against people that were attacking you.
And if there is a militia today, it's really the National Guard.
Or the people that are taking over federal wilderness areas.
That is a militia. And there's one down in Texas I was just reading about today also that's been going on since 1990. I don't know.
This is what scares everybody, because they never know what we're going to talk about.
And you know, who thought we were going to talk about Texas? Well, you're a member of the Airport Commission, one of many things that you're involved in. And I don't know how you'd have time, especially now that they kicked you upstairs here at Thomson Reuters, and all these other things that you're involved in. And you're involved in heavily in the China education, and I wish you could do something about their stock market, but
that's a perplexing problem.
We talked about today's topic being, will Uber give the Airport Commission a lift? A little play on words there. But I know that the Uber drivers want access to the airport. Now, obviously, the taxi drivers don't want them there because it's competition. I know only good things about Uber. And I guess you could say I have a prejudice because I have a son who's driving in Florida, Uber, and he loves it. And actually, I don't see why we couldn't have them, and I know it's been certainly an area of great discussion.
Yeah, it is, and we had a large public hearing Monday this week where, by my count, some of the news reports said 250 people, but I counted 450, and I was chairing the meeting, so I had plenty of time to count and listen to a lot of people. We had about 42 speakers as well that were expressing both sides of the story, basically.
So let's say it was a long meeting.
It was a long meeting. It was a little over 3 hours, but you know, that's the democratic process for the committee that's appointed to be the hearing officers at the Airport Commission. You have to listen to that. The proposal was out there for an ordinance that allows something called TNCs, Transportation Network Companies, to operate fully at the airport. Today, they can drop off, but they can't pick up. That's taxis do both. Taxis that are licensed at the airport can pick up there. You have to register with the airport, pay fees, and do that. And that will be the same as the ordinance with Uber, that they'll have to register and pay fees and so forth and so on. So
actually, anybody can drop off at the airport,
yes,
whether it's an unlicensed taxi or just a car, as we all do,
right,
take people to the airport.
Right, it's the pickup that you want, that the airport deals with. And there's some infrastructure on the airport side. There's lanes to allow safe departure from the vehicle. So, you know, you as the person in the car can get out, get to the inside. For taxis, there's a whole infrastructure of starters, people that keep the taxis queued up, call the taxi from the lot that's off the airport, route enough taxis into the places. So taxis have a bigger infrastructure in the airport in order to operate. So there's more cost from the airport assigned to the taxis. The airport operates under a cost recovery model for things like that. They charge what it costs them. So the Uber drivers will be the same thing. Whatever the cost is of them coming in and picking people up, well, that's what is in essence trying to be recovered from the fees.
And they pay for it.
They do pay for
Yeah.
it. They will. It's in the ordinance, and there's ordinance copies I just brought here just so people actually know. Because one of the worries about the taxis was that they pay and there's not going to be any payment by Uber, and that's not true. We always look at the taxi ordinances to make sure they're current and effective, and look at the cost recovery on our side and make sure that it's correct. We'll be looking at the taxi ordinance right on the heels of this TNC ordinance. So there may be some adjustments in fees and things like that to true up. That happens from time to time.
But it's not as though Uber won't be paying fees. They'll be paying the same fees. Obviously, it would be unconstitutional if they didn't pay the same fees.
Well, it's not exactly they'll both pay to drop off, or rather to pick up, and it costs more for the airport to allow the taxis to pick up because of the way they need to queue up and things like that. So
With the starters and
so
all?
there's a more cost. So
That makes sense.
it's cost recovery in both cases. And then there's the safety, that you want to make sure that your drivers are okay. And then the state has regulations about insurance for both. So that stuff gets covered. There's very interesting things like how old the vehicles can be, which, how fast you have, because we actually have rules about how old the vehicles can be in the taxi world. So a taxi driver that has a car that gets too old has to refresh the car, because we don't want people coming in from out of town or even in town to have to get into an old car, which tend to be sometimes not as safe as a newer car or as clean. So we'll have rules on both ends, and we're going to try our best to make those consistent.
A lot of Ubers are limousine type cars.
Some are.
Even though they're individually owned.
But many, depending on, there's different services that Uber has, and that's an example of one of these companies. And they have some that are more modest cars, and they have some that are more almost the town car type, black cars. And it just depends. Different customers want different types of cars, so they elect to use a different Uber service, just like you might elect to use a taxi or one of those shared ride, the buses or Super Shuttle, or you might use a limousine service like a Carrier or a Boston Coach or somebody to get you out, depending on what you do.
Now, it's quite contentious in Europe right now with Uber trying to get really inroads into certain countries, and I see that they're having some pretty heated battles about it. But I don't anticipate that here, because it seems to be just a common sense, smooth ride ahead. And maybe Lyft will be the next one that's going to want to get in there.
Well, this ordinance, transportation network companies will allow any of them that are in that class to, as it's defined, to get in. So it will include Uber and Lyft right off the bat. On the extreme ends, there are some taxi drivers who would say, we don't want them in at all. There are other taxi drivers that say, we'll compete with them, just make sure the regulations and the fees are fair. They don't exactly have to be equal, but there's got to be a rationale if they're not. And I think the Airport Committee has to vote on it, and then the full commission. So it's 15 people who I don't want to predict what they would say, but I think the idea that we would not have these services at the airport would probably be the low end of the probability scale. I think we'll see them there. I think we'll see the commissioners taking a hard look at making sure they think the fees are rational and fair between both.
Bottom line, it's better for the commuters. Now, I was really shocked this week when I saw that Delta raised fares on every flight $4. I remember the days when they used to give us food on a plane, things like that. I flew with the Wright brothers, actually, as a stewardess in my earlier life. But the other day, and then all the other airlines jumped on also. Airlines had the best year I think they've ever had last year. Petroleum fuel prices are as low as they have been. They made billions. They're charging for luggage. They're charging for just about everything now. And I just found it unconscionable that they just said every flight $4 more. For what? Are they going to give us better service? No. It's going to be the same service.
I would think I've seen some economic reports that suggest that by the end of this year that fuel costs will at least be double what they are today. That's just, who knows what's going to happen. I would just say it's not going to be low, but certainly the U.S. becoming one of the larger producers of some of the fuel has taken some of the burden off of particularly airlines, and that's, I think, their number 2 costs after the people aspect of it. But you know, I think the nice thing about that, and this is very similar to the idea of Uber and Lyft and those kind of companies at the airport with taxis and limousines and the others that are already there. It's about choices in this country. It's competition and choices. So you see an airline like Spirit where you have to pay extra money to get an aisle seat, you have to pay extra money for a bag that you carry on, and so forth and so on, is what you call the ultra low cost airline. And so there are a bunch of folks that exactly fits their model, you know, and then there's people who say $4, don't really care, that's where I'm going to go. And for whatever reason, it could be that they have a lot of miles, or they're in that tradition of going there, but having the choices and then letting them compete with each other. And those two are competing on a really interesting basis with different types of products to fly people to different places. And that's kind of what I see these transportation things being. So if somebody says, like the real extreme, the small percent of taxi drivers that say we don't want them in here, to me that's like Delta saying I don't want Spirit in there, and saying that publicly to the airport commission. You know, you don't win by getting regulated away. You win by head-to-head competition in this country.
Well, that is true. That is true. But speaking of head-to-head competition, there is in the airport now a lot of competition.
There is, yeah.
In terms of restaurants, in terms of, there's been tremendous upgrading in the last few years of all those non-flight areas. Mm-hmm. And I know you were on board for a lot of that. So.
Right. No, there's huge, we're doing a lot of construction now. You see a lot of white walls up. A whole slew of restrooms are being upgraded, which is the number one thing all the passengers that go there a lot are going to be really happy about. And then there's a lot of,
although I understand that they are taking the Senator Craig restroom and they're making it a national monument.
Things are happening with that restroom, but not a monument.
Oh.
Not a monument. The restrooms there, I think, will be quite modernized, and some of them already exist, but more and more of them. And then I would say about between a third and a half of the restaurants and the retail will be changing over. You'll see more of those in the next 3 or 4 years, where you'll see some new choices and things like that. And speaking of choices, a lot of people don't know on that second level, if you come in by Concourse E, there's a MSP PGA Golf up there. There's actually golf simulators.
Oh, is that right?
You can go in.
I didn't know
There's
that.
a restaurant there. You can go in there. You can you can try out your own swing, have somebody put the swing analyzer on there, and you can putt, you can do different things. It's an interesting way to kill time. That doesn't mean having a caloric intake. They also have a place to eat there. It's right above that Ike's.
Now, do they have a bowling alley?
No bowling alley yet, but no one's proposed that.
Here I am.
There you go. Might be something to think
Still
about.
bowling at this point in life. And
No, bowling's kind of popular
in
these
fact,
days.
at 2:23 last Monday, it shocked not only me, it shocked everybody.
That's a
in
good
the
score,
area.
Alan.
It was a very good score.
I always
I
felt
couldn't
good when I
believe it.
broke 200.
I couldn't believe it. My bowling has gone way down over the years, but every once in a while you hit one of those spots where you're in the zone. And
I was looking at some statistics about the airport when you're speaking about the food. We've won numerous food awards and retail awards. The team's done a really great job there of taking care of that. But the thing that struck me...
no Chipotle in the airport?
No, they certainly could be, but not. I want to make sure everything's okay too. The thing that I read the other day suggested that I think we were the #1 on-time large airport, and I've got to investigate that a little more and see if there are any other criteria on it. But for 2015, and that would be a remarkable thing to be in the snow belt, which I think this airport does a fantastic job with.
I think they do.
Cleaning off things, and I think air traffic control does a good job of, getting things into the air and safely onto the ground and things like that. So it's quite a ballet of activity. Probably the most interesting thing, if you get a chance to ever really watch a snow clearing event at an airport like that, it's just it's an incredible choreographed event.
Well, mention it to Delta and they'll charge money and sell tickets.
We do have a viewing area there, Alan, at the airport now, so people can go and watch, just like the old days when you were working with the Wright brothers. Viewing area was important.
Yes, we had the whole field to ourselves. I was recently in Amsterdam, and I was blown away by the effectiveness of their baggage loading area. They're so far ahead of us in that regard. Can we envision something like that here?
I think so. We're actually redoing the Terminal 1 baggage area right now. Here's an interesting thing. If I showed you a picture of the Terminal 2, the newer terminal, the Humphrey Terminal.
The Humphrey Terminal.
Baggage.
As opposed to the Lindbergh Terminal. I don't
Correct.
give up easily.
That's okay. I can translate too. The baggage claim system underneath there is modern and wide and very up to date because it was built that way to start with. The one in Terminal 1, or Lindbergh, was built in a more constrained area at the time that it was originally built. So as you upgrade it, you have to retrofit new technology into a space that's already pretty small. And we are doing that right now. There's a large project to upgrade that and make it more efficient. And I think that part of the operation, coupled with the idea of the way the bags are tagged and scanned today, makes for much more efficient routing of the bags. And now people are starting to talk about putting RFID tags into the bag itself, which will even allow a different thing. But as you know, I fly around a lot, so I have this mobile app from Delta. When my bag is scanned, I can look up and see that my bag's been loaded into the plane. If I've got a change of plane in the middle of the flight, I can watch it unload and load. And by the same token, if it's not loaded on there by the time you take off, you might be a bit worried, and you can collect it when you get there. So the technology
there's been tremendous
good.
upgrades in technology in that
Exactly.
regard, yeah. And it should result in less lost baggage.
Right.
I am assuming that it does, but
I think so, because it costs the airlines a lot of money when they lose a bag, and I've had it happen. And normally, when a bag is lost, it's some kind of wintry event, a storm event, planes are late, there's not enough time, or they have some kind of breakdown. Breakdowns are pretty rare in the mechanics of the bag system, so it's more often a late arriving plane that makes it hard to get the connection. But if you could make that work all the time, then people wouldn't necessarily have to carry on your bag.
True.
I wouldn't carry on my bag if I knew that by the time I got the baggage claim I would only have to wait 5 minutes. Today's guarantee from Delta is 20. Well, I'd rather just pack small.
If you're coming in
and
from
carry on.
overseas, it takes 20 to get to the baggage claim.
Right.
So,
Not big deal then.
but last time you were here, we talked briefly about drones. Now, the FAA has stepped in some regard regarding licensing of drones, and I know there are people who scream about governmental regulation, but that is one of the real common sense things to me that speaks to the side of safety.
I would agree with you, Alan. So I think they actually simplified it pretty well in their whole process. So people that are using them recreationally have to register them very minimally, and people that are using commercially have to register them in a more elaborate fashion.
And keep them away from
Right, both of them
really
have to
passenger planes.
They have rules about where you keep them and so forth, and they all
Or
make
any
sense.
planes for that matter. Yeah.
They have to keep them away from the places. So I think they came down really well when they came down. I would have liked them to come forward a year or so earlier, and I think that's one of the things that they could work on. Is with technology advancing so much, you've got to give at least guidance, if not regulation, a lot earlier.
And we have a minute and a half. You're from Burlington, Vermont. Bernie Sanders is from Burlington, Vermont. Do you want to say anything political in this last minute or so?
Bernie was very popular in Vermont because he was a man of the people, and the people in Vermont expect something that's very similar to Minnesota, very accessible elected officials. And Bernie was accessible, and he also spoke his mind, and you knew where he stood. And there's a lot of respect for people like that in the state of Vermont, because people are very independent. They tend to be, it's a clear blue state, very similar to Minnesota, but that's the kind of leader they look for.
And people who speak their mind reminds me of Donald Trump. I'm not sure he has a mind, but...
well, he has his fans, and he certainly lit up the election cycle this time around.
He is the surprise of this election so far, anyway. And
we'll see what happens.
Interesting, yeah.
Are you predicting the two of them against each other?
No, I gave up predicting 2 marriages ago. So anyway, Rick King, congratulations on your elevation to Pope, and
it's a little bit extreme, Alan. Actually, the titles juggle around a lot. We don't worry about them. I'm still the same old guy doing the same old job. Thank you,
always a
Alan.
pleasure.
Good to see you.